right. Our next presenter is Frank Broen. Frank Broen is president of Teach America, a firm that has been visualizing content for 40 years. He's also an associate of Metro Analytics, a new transportation firm making waves by developing NCHRP reports on right sizing, corridor management, and winning projects head-to-head with the big boys. He serves as secretary of the Visualization and Transportation Committee. When he's the best secretary of any committee I've ever seen. Good job, Frank. That's right. When he's not striving to achieve his vision statement, which is communicating simply visualized, he sings lead with his barbershop quartet, the Rolling Tones. We need to have a meeting in Florida so we can hear that. So I do want to say that Frank was particularly excited when we told him that one of our presenters wasn't going to be here today and he'd have a little extra time. And he just uploaded a presentation that, no joke, has 272 slides in it. He says we're only going to go through about 80% of those. So sit back and enjoy.
All right. Thank you. Yes, this will be very different than the presentation that you've just seen. So basically the idea is that we want to inspire action through story, and this is how visualization can improve decision making. So we have seen this week that there are some really cool visualization tools that we have at our disposal that are really able to help us look at problems and identify solutions that are going to make our transportation system work better. So this is from the 2017 symposium, but here are some Map 21 displays that show some really cool ways that we can look at problems, and find these solutions, looking at chord diagrams and how these things are related, and OD matrices and how this is going to be put together. And what we'll do is we'll take these ideas and we'll take them to our decision makers and we'll say, I have found the answer to your problem, and this is how we can actually make a difference. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. And we end up pulling our hair out and said, why didn't you understand, just like Ross was showing, that there's this great inequality between, people and how they travel, and we're just completely frustrated by that. So basically this presentation is to help get over that problem by inspiring action through story. So basically what I'm going to do is to do an anthology of just short stories in this presentation. So there's basically going to be 3 acts to this. The first one is keep it simple, the second will be answer the question, and the third will be tell a data story. This is kind of, there are 3 different ideas. So one is kind of like I'm going to describe a leaf. The second one is I'm going to describe a tree. And the third is tell a data story is how do we make a forest out of all of that information. So the first step is keep it simple. Make it clear, concise, and memorable. The first part of, to be clear that your message is clear, every slide has 1 point, and each one of those points supports the overall message of what you want to deliver. So, be clear, be concise. I don't know how to be any more concise than that. So here is my first example of this, and if anybody was in the session where Florida was talking about their mobility measures, this is a map to the future of how we can take these performance measures that really describe mobility in an incredibly good way, and this is how to think about it. This is an example of being simple. So this is a map to the future. Then in 1985, the Highway Capacity Manual was the first book to describe the capacity of a road. 1987, they came up with software that would help you do that. In 1987, Florida also took that software and made generalized tables, so they took the whole handbook and put it into 3 sheets. In 2010, they were able to make this multimodal, so we were not just looking at cars, but also other modes of transportation. And in 2005, Florida developed a mobility performance measures matrix of a rich set of measures that actually describe mobility. So there's this toolbox, and they have this data, but now they need to see how to use that to actually make better decisions. Well, what this describes is either people movement or freight movement, and in all of the different kind of modes that you can use to move people and freight. So if we can take and look at each one of those measures, and we can look at a specific point, so we can define mobility at a node. Well, we can define mobility at a node, we can also take that information and look at a corridor. Well, we can define mobility on a corridor, then we can actually take that and extrapolate it into a network. Well, if we can define that network, then we can do this for an entire city. And if we take that same set of principles of nodes, corridors, and networks, we can take that and apply it to the state level. And if we can do it for the state level, we can take it and do it for our entire country. And if we can do it for our entire country, then we can take this information and help describe mobility for the entire world. What they're lacking is a dashboard to be able to make sense of all of that data that they have. So the question is, what kind of future do you want? Is this a direction that you want to go? So this is an example of being clear. The third point I want to make here is you want to make it memorable. So here's a really short story about being memorable. Building a better mobility system means that looking something new and saying, really? So this is a way we can build something completely new where systems are here to move you, not make you wait. You don't have to own a car to live and work here. We have modes you like to use because that's how it should be. You can catch one from here to there in less than 5 minutes. Seriously, what Amazon did for shopping, this is mobility reimagined. So this was the opening that I used for the War Games last year that TRB did, where they basically threw it out and said, how can we make TNCs, the Ubers and Lyfts, work better as part of an entire cohesive mobility system? And that was the opening that we used, and fortunately we did receive the People's Choice Award for the most interesting presentation. It was also interesting because out of the 9 teams competing, they all recognized that all we needed was basically a single app where all of the modes that we would take are available in one particular place, and you could decide how you wanted to get to work by looking at your app in the morning and decided how you felt. All right, so we're going to move to the second act of this, which is answer the question. And what I'm going to suggest is, in one clear sentence, inspire action by telling a data story. So your role is to be a mentor who helps them understand what to do. So the first part of this is to write one clear sentence. And so I'm going to give you a very small example of this. This is a presentation about how access management could be applied, and that the basic premise is that left turns create more crashes and create problems in the system. So, but on this particular corridor, there's an awful lot of trucks, so we want to diagnose the truck maneuverability problems. And it turns out if we put a median there, the trucks are going to have to take a really long circuitous route in order to be able to get back to the direction that they want to go. And this is not really very acceptable. So what we want to do is diagnose those truck maneuverability problems and then solve those problems. So in this particular case, we are going to make the suggestion that we can actually put in a couple of mid-block roundabouts that will allow the trucks to be able to make a U-turn and be able to get to where they want, and it will also improve the safety and mobility of this particular system. So I have a single sentence here, diagnose truck maneuverability problems, and then solve those problems. So my basic sentence for this entire presentation is inspire action through story. That's what I'm trying to reinforce. So show how you get there is the other part that you can do this. I'm going to take a slightly different example. This is an infographic, and this is in two parts. This is dealing with metropolitan planning organizations and all of the documents that are used to create that. And I did a series of presentations, and recognizing that there's a number of documents and how do they interact with each other, this was basically a timeline to help people understand that. That the blue is the MPO documents and the red is the statewide documents, and it begins with this so the first document is the UPWP that's created by the MPO, and that has to be done before you can actually create the work plan, which then allows you to do the TIP, which then allows you to do the STIP, which then you do the list of priority projects. So this kind of showed how everything worked in one particular place. This was also intended to help you become like a mentor. Now in this case you can either be reactive, proactive, or predictive, but this is the upper half of this infographic, and there's again a multiple set of planning documents, and each one of these documents was described, but how did they actually fit together? And what I discovered was there was no place that I could look and see all of these documents in one place to see how do they relate. So basically here's the current year, and so the UPWP is this year's document, and that the TIP is done for these 5 years, and that the Florida Transportation Plan is a 50-year document, but that they all relate to each other, and here's a way to do this. This infographic was intended to be a mentoring device. I didn't expect people to just pick this up and learn it, but this was a tool that could be used to help decision makers say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is the document that we're working on and how it fits in with all of the other things that are required. So now we get to the tree section of this presentation where it's telling a data story. And so as you marvel at the magnitude and humanize the data, you will inspire action. So that's the goal here. So being able to marvel at the magnitude of the data, really get them excited about what this means. So I'm going to use the example from the 2017 presentation that I did, where I looked at all of the ways that states reported their performance measures. And basically I summarized this by saying, are you creating a traditional report or are you providing visionary support? So what I did is look at all 50 states, and basically I looked at how much did their presentation allow you to support decision making on this axis, and on this one, how outcome oriented were the actual measures that they were using. And I looked at all 50 states and based on that kind of ranking, looked at presenting to the public how well did they do that. And basically, Virginia demonstrated again this year why they are so good at this is because they provided a rich set of data that started at a very, very simple dashboard that was just one set of numbers, and you could get a sense of how well their system was working just looking at that simple one, and then you could drill down deeper and deeper to get to the real information that helps you understand how you might solve those problems. So really good example of that. So, but this is a way of marveling at the data and seeing how do we, in this specific place, how do we compare, what can we learn from other states and how well they're doing things. And the third part of telling it, or the second, is humanizing the data. We really want to make this real to people. So this was a presentation just done by Metro Analytics 2 weeks ago, in which they were awarded the project to look at how the Riverport system can be improved in the state of Kentucky. And without going into great depth, this was one example of how you would use a pie chart in the right way. There's one number I want you to see, which is that 76% of the heavy goods are moved by rail in Kentucky. That's a predominant movement. And the real question that we have to them is, through stakeholder outreach and looking at really good data analytics, how much of that rail traffic could be moved to move down the rivers that Kentucky has. This is an opportunity to improve the entire transportation system by looking at a really underutilized asset that they had. And so if we look at the economic, operational, and regulatory tools that are available as to how you would move traffic, that what we really get to is, can we influence growth through action and investments? Because there are 800,000 really poor people who live in Kentucky. And many of those are in the areas where the river ports are, and could they completely overhaul their economic system to help make the river an economic engine that's going to move these goods more effectively and also improve the economy for these people? That's the opportunity that exists in Kentucky. And so that can humanize it. So basically what we want to do is to inspire action. And so this comes to the last of my stories, and this was in Florida when they were evaluating the trend system that they had, and there was a question as to whether or not trends really mattered. Is it important that we know what's happened? So we put this presentation together, and so a condensation of that is, this is trends reimagined. So simpler is better, but simpler is harder. So they had been producing 17 different specific topic reports and dealing with these 4 areas and summarized it into a single fast facts document. But the more things are changing, and they are changing faster. How are we going to keep up with all of this information? We are in the most transformational period for transportation, with all of these things that are changing, with the potential for autonomous vehicles. So how can we take the data that we have and turn that into information and knowledge and actually be able to take action on that? So this is what we proposed, was let's have a document that will show this simple graph of where the trends are. Here's the little story that tells us what that is, the source of that data, and how does this actually impact the state's transportation goals. So in this very simple format, we can deliver an awful lot of information. And so here's the one sentence that tells us that what this graph means and makes this meaningful. So if graphics is intelligence made visible, then we want to have a dynamic product that is very accessible to people in the way that they actually want to consume this data. So this is Trends Reimagined. And what was interesting is, after we gave this presentation, the response was, well, we thought we might want to shut this program down, but what you've just shown us is this might be the most important thing that we're doing, that we actually need to put more emphasis into this product. So this was, I think, a good example of how you can inspire action through telling a story. All right, so now this comes to the interactive part, to see if you have remembered anything that I've said. There are 3 basic parts to inspire action through story, and the first one was keep it simple. Thank you. The second one was answer the question. And the third part is tell a data story. Thank you. So hopefully that will be helpful to you in inspiring action through a data story. I will say that Nancy Duarte has just put out a brand new book of which I borrowed some of her ideas. A very excellent resource. She is quite good at this. So we've made it through 73 slides so far. If you actually go and pull I've got a minute and a half. If you pull the document, what I've got there is there's a section called Visuals with Purpose that kind of shows how I think about putting together graphics. There's a visual toolbox that the DVC from Federal Highway put together, and I kind of threw this in here. The VIZ Guide Primer is just a single slide that lets you know there's more information online. And that the visualization highlights is I went through every presentation of the 2017 symposium that we had and basically found the best slide for every single one of those presentations and basically put it there with a link to the YouTube video. So here they are. So in session 1A, you can see what these presentations were and actually be able to look these up online. And so there are a whole bunch of these. This is just an interesting resource for you to have if you want to pull this PDF. And maybe I can do the same thing for the 2019. And with 13 seconds left, are there any questions?
Good job, Frank.